new unit. So we are in section 3.1 right now, and the first lesson here is on domain and range. And so just kind of a little bit of a review. When we have a number line that looks like this, we only have one dimension, and this dimension would just be equivalent of like the x variable. Okay, so when we add the y variable, we have this y-axis here and we have the x-axis here. So when we look at just this one dimension with just the x, with inequality notation, remember inequalities are less thans or greater thans, we look at this and we say, okay, our starting point here is going to be -3. So we would start with -3, and because this is a closed-in circle, then we know that it's less than or equal to. So closed-in circle is going to be less than and equal to or greater than and equal to. So we start at -3. The value of x is between, so if I look at this value of x is what's between -3 and 2. So this is how I would write this in inequality notation. Now with interval notation, we take out the inequalities and we take out the x and we use braces or brackets. So the way that it works is if it's a closed circle, we're going to use brackets and be very intentional with that being a bracket. If it's an open circle, so if it looks like this and it's an open circle like we're going to have in this next problem, then we're going to use parentheses. We also always use parentheses if we're using infinities. So we don't have an infinity here because we have a clear starting point and a clear ending point. So if this is my starting point, because it's closed in circle, it's included, I would have bracket -3, and I end at 2, and I would have a bracket on 2. Okay, now interval notation is going to be the more popular notation. Really the only time we're going to use inequality notation is when we're doing piecewise functions, which is going to be later in the unit. Okay, so we look at this one. We have a clear starting point. So our clear starting point is going to be at -4. It's a closed-in circle, so I'm going to start at -4. My x variable is going to be anything that is greater than or equal to -4. And then I stop at 1. So I'm going to stop here at 1. Oh, I just made a mistake. Because it's an open circle, it's just a less than. Okay, now we're going to start over again. So we have this jump that goes over here to 2. So I'm going to start at 2. It is a closed circle. So I know that my x value here is going to be greater than 2. Now, this variable right here, or this value of 2, goes on to infinity. It just keeps going. That's what this arrow tells us. So we can write it this way. This is what I would tell you if you're in inequality notation. Or you can say x is greater than or equal to 2. So these two things are exactly the same. Now when we look at interval notation, again we have a clear starting spot, so we use a bracket because it's closed. We're going to go to 1, and 1 is a parenthesis. And then we're going to start over again. So we start over again at 2, and this time we keep going because the arrow tells us it doesn't stop, and we're going to go to infinity, and infinity is always a parenthesis. So when you see a break in your line or break in your domain, that's what this is the domain is the x, you're going to actually see two different parts of your domain. All right, so now let's add that extra dimension in here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're still going to treat it like an x. So here's my x-axis right here. And if I look at this, I can put my pen on my point and I go all the way in the x direction and I keep going in the x direction. I never lift up my point. So because I never lift up my pencil, it's going to look like this one. Okay? So my starting point is -5. And my x value is going to keep going. It's going to be bigger than -5, and it's going to just keep going, and x is going to continue. So I can write it as x is greater than -5. I can also write it this way. X is greater than or equal to -5. So my interval notation here, I'm going to start at -5, and I'm going to keep going to infinity. I just keep going. So don't get jammed up with the fact that the line is moving up and down. Just think of this as just your x values. Okay, so now we have to look at the range. So remember here, our domain are going to be our x values. So that's where this -5 comes from. Our range, this part of it, these are going to be our y values. So if this is my starting point, when I'm dealing with range, I'm always going to go from the bottom to the top. Just like when I do my domain, with my domain, I'm always going from left to right. So if I start at the bottom, this is the lowest point on my graph. So if this is y values, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pick my y value off, and it's going to be -1. So I start at -1, and I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And then at this point, at 5, I have no y values that are above 5. So I start at -1, it's included. Now I'm dealing with y values, so this has to be a y, not an x. And I'm going to go all the way to -5, or sorry, to +5, and 5 is included. So my interval notation here would be start at -1 and go all the way to 5, and 5 is included. Now, let me show you something. So here, this is an obviously colored in circle, so I know that it's going to be a bracket. And this is an obviously colored in circle, so I know that this is going to be a bracket. But if this circle wasn't here to indicate this point, and it was just the line, then this is still as far as it gets. Because the line is there, it's included. It's going to be a bracket. The only time you're going to use a parenthesis is if you have a very obvious open circle. Okay? All right. Now this one gets a little more funky because we have two parts. So we're going to start in the leftmost part. This is my x. So if I look at this arrow is going to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. So I am really starting at -infinity. I'm starting clear out here at a negative value because this tells you it's going to keep going. It's not going quickly in the x direction, but it's still going to keep going in this negative x direction. So what I'm going to say is that x, so I have this -infinity, which I don't use, so x is going to be less than or equal, so x, keep going this direction, to -2. Now, I have to completely start over because I have to pick up my pencil and jump to this next point. So this next point, my x value, remember domain is x, my x value starts here at 2. This is an open circle, so I'm going to start at 2. Oh, sorry. I'm going to start at 2, and I have values in x, I have values in x, I have values in x, and it's just going to keep going, values in x. So this is going to be, my 2 value is going to be, x is going to be greater than 2. So I can also write it this way, x is going to be greater than 2. Not equals, just greater than. So my interval notation, if I'm starting clear out here on the left, I'm going to have -infinity, and I'm going to stop at -2. It's included, so I have a bracket. I pick up my pencil and I move to this 2. It's an open circle, so I have a parenthesis, and I'm going to keep going in the x direction to infinity. Okay, let's look at our range. So remember, range, I'm going to start at the bottom. So I know that I have a part here and a part here, but what I'm doing is I'm looking at the lowest point on my graph. So my lowest point on the graph is going to be this guy, because this guy is going to just keep going. This arrow tells me that it's going to keep going. So I'm starting clear down here in -infinity, right? And I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going until I get to this point. Well, this point is included, but this value here is 3. So if I come over here and I look at this value, I still have this value of 3, and it's going to continue to go up. So even though I have a break in my graph, I don't have a break in my y. So I can draw a line here, I can draw a line here, I can draw a line here. Even when I get to this point, I can draw a line here at 3, and I'm going to hit both parts of my graph. So what I'm going to say on this is because I can find a value of y anywhere on my graph, this is going to be all real numbers. Any part on this graph, I can find a y value. Now, let's go back and look at the domain again. Anywhere over here, I can find an x value if I draw a VLT, but between -2 and 2, I can't. If I draw a line here, I'm never going to hit the graph because there's never anything there. So that's why I have two different parts to this graph. okay? Down here, I have two different parts. So if it's all real numbers, I'm basically saying my graph can go from negative infinity to positive infinity in the y direction. Anywhere in here, I can draw a line and I'm going to hit the y-axis. Okay, let's look at this one. So I see a break, so I have to assume I'm going to have two parts. So if I look at this one, I'm going to start at this point because this is my leftmost point. That's where I want to start, my leftmost point. So this value here is -4. And I'm going to go all the way here to 0. So I'm going to start at -4. It's just a less than because it's an open circle. And I'm going to have an x. So I go to this point. Now remember, here I have a break, but if I drop a vertical line, I'm really connecting these 2 points. So I really am not going to have a break because what happens is, even though I have this break here, this jump on my graph, in the domain, there's really not a break because I can just go up my line and get on this guy and keep going. So we're just going to say -4, x is greater than -4. So what that looks like for my interval notation is I start at -4 and it's a parenthesis, and I'm going to just keep on going to infinity. All right, let's go over here to range. So remember, range is I'm looking for my bottom value first. So this is my lowest value on my graph. So if this is my lowest value on my graph, that's going to happen at -8. So I'm going to start at -8. And I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, and then I have to stop because these are all y values that work. So I have values from -8, it's just a less than because it's open. My y values are going to continue, but then I stop at -4. Now, I have a less than or equals because it's a closed-in circle. Now, if I draw horizontal lines here, I don't hit y. So I'm going to have two parts of this. I start again at 0, and we say it's going to continue in the y direction. Now this is not a very steep slope, but because this arrow is going to keep going, it's going to keep going up. So my y value is going to keep going up. I could also write it as y is greater than or equal to 0. The y values are just going to get bigger after 0. Okay, so for my interval notation, I'm going to have two parts. This one says I start at -8 and I end at -4. And then I'm going to start again at 0 and I'm going to go in the y direction to infinity. All right, let's flip it over and try another one. So again, I have two parts. So if I'm looking at my inequality notation, I'm going to go to my leftmost point. So leftmost point, this is what I'm looking for. So if I go, here's my leftmost point. I want the x value. The x value here is going to happen at -5. And with this value, it's going to be less than or equal to. And I'm going to go all the way over here to -1. And this is an open circle, so it stays less than. Now, my x values take a break. So because my next values take a break, I start again at 2. It's included. And I'm going to go over here to 4, and 4 is also included. All right, so my interval notation, it's really nice when something looks like this because you're saying, okay, we're going to start at -5. We're going to go to -1. That's a parenthesis because that's my open circle. I'm going to start again at 2, and I'm going to go to 4. Okay, so now we're going to start with the range. So this is where I'm going to start at the bottom. Now, be careful with this because on the domain, we had to start over here with this piece of the function first because it's the leftmost point. But with the range, I'm going to start with this piece of the function first because this is the lowest point on my graph. So my lowest point on the graph starts at -8. So I go -8, and I'm going to go up here to -4. So I have closed circles on both ends. And then no y values all the way up here until I get to positive 4. Now this value of positive 4 is a straight line. So I'm not going up anymore and I'm not going down anymore. So what we're going to say is that this value of y equals 4. Now it doesn't matter that there's an open circle here and a closed circle here. Anywhere along this line it equals 4. Okay, so if we go down here to our interval notation, we're going to say we want to go from -8 to -4. That encompasses this line, and when we want this, we're just going to put a brace and we're going to say it's this one value of 4. Now this is not parentheses, this is just one value. And it's anywhere along here is just this value of 4. Okay, so now our functions are going to change a little bit. They're not always going to be lines. So if I look at this is going to continue in the x direction, and it's going to continue in the x direction in the positive side. And so my left to right here is going to be all real numbers. I'm going to hit everything that I want, all my x values. So my interval notation would be -infinity to infinity. So all of these x values. Now y is going to be the same. Y is a lot easier to see because this is going to continue to go in the negative y and continue to go in the positive y. So I have all real numbers, and down here it's the same, -infinity to infinity. Okay, so domain. So x value. Farthest left value here is going to be -1. This is my x value. So I can keep going up and down and up and down, and this is going to continue to go here. So really what we want to say is that x is greater than or equal to -1. All values that are greater than -1. So my interval notation would be start at -1 and just keep going in the positive x direction. Okay, so with range we want to find the lowest point. Well, it looks like this is the lowest point, right? But beware, because I have this arrow. So this arrow means it's going to keep going. So because of this, I don't have a lowest point. This is going to keep going. And then my highest point is going to be right up here. So this point here at 1 and this point here at 1, it doesn't matter that it's the same point. It's there. Now, I just added these little points, but remember, if the line hits it, it's not an open circle, so it's included. So what we're going to say is that y is less than or equal to 1. If this is my value of 1 right here, it's going to be all values less than 1. So on my graph, what I would have is -infinity to 1. Now, remember, you're always going from bottom to top. So because you're going from bottom to top, you have to start with -infinity. So if I wrote 1 to infinity, that means I'm going up. So that's wrong. And if I wrote 1 to -infinity, this means I'm starting here and I'm going down, but the order's backwards. So that's wrong. So be careful, the order matters. Okay, I'm going to pause the video and I want you to do the last one, and then when you finish, go ahead and unpause. Okay, this one's a little tricky, so let's talk about this. So remember, with domain, I'm dealing with x values. So if I want to know my farthest left value, well, this keeps going to the left. So this is going to keep going forever. So I don't have a farthest left value. So if I look at this, I'm going to keep going and keep going and keep going, and I get to this point. So you would think that maybe it would stop at -1, but remember, I'm dealing with x values. So if I go down here, this line is still included. So I'm going to pop on this line, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to get to 4. Well, now if I go up, or if I go to the right, I don't have any values between 4 and 6, so I have to have a break. So this means x is going to be less than 4. So if I start at 4, it's going to go everything this direction. And so all I'm doing is I'm popping on from this line to this line, because in the x direction, I can just draw a vertical line and still hit my lines. And then I have to start over again at 6, and it's just going to keep going. And I know it looks like it goes up, but because I've got this arrow, it's going to continue in the x direction. So I go here in interval, -infinity, I get to this point, I can draw a vertical line and pop down to this line, and I keep going, and I hit 4. and then I have to pick up my pencil and go over here to 6. I start again at 6, and I'm just going to keep going. So in my Y, this is my lowest point. So my lowest point starts at -8. I can draw horizontal lines. I get to this point, I draw a horizontal line. I'm hitting 2, so if I started down here and I get up here, I can come over to this. It's all connected. And now I just stay on this line, and it's going to keep going up. Now, it doesn't really matter. It's like I never really have to recognize this part of my graph because this is just going to continue to go up. So I started at -8, and I'm just going to keep going in the positive Y direction. I'm going to always have a value. That's what this means.